Hey art nerds! So recently Paul Rubens reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in taking a look at their flower color matching song watercolor palette. So this is a 24 color palette that is designed for floral painting and floral art. And as someone who paints a lot of flowers and a lot of people, I said, yes, of course I would be interested in taking a look at it and sharing it with you guys today. So if you're new here, I have reviewed a lot of Paul Rubens products over the years, from multiples of their flagship palettes to their student grade brand Mei Liang and their other student grade brand Hitoto. I will link those for you guys down in the description if you guys are curious about that. But I am really excited to take a look at today's palette and to be able to share it with you guys. Hey there, art nerds. So recently Paul Rubens contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in trying out their flower color matching watercolor palette. Now, you guys know, if you hang out here, that I like Paul Rubens and I like to paint flowers. So I said, of course, I would be interested. So this was sent to me via Paul Rubens. Thank you guys so much. They sent it through Amazon, and they also included a small cotton pulp watercolor journal. So I'm going to be trying both of these out today. Now, this is not a review because this was sent to me care of, but I do plan on unboxing, swatching, color mixing, and painting a field test with you guys. So hopefully it'll still give you all the information that you need to decide if this palette is right for you. Other than the little watercolor journal and the watercolors themselves, I have received no other compensation. We did not discuss what kind of video it would be, so this is my own free choice, and all opinions are my own, and I would not have said yes to this if I wasn't already interested in it, if I didn't enjoy painting flowers, if I didn't think you guys would be into it, and if I didn't already enjoy Paul Rubens watercolors. Both of these came in a very normal Amazon box, so I don't really feel the need to show you guys that. They are both individually shrink wrapped, which makes sense. A lot of stuff that fulfills from Amazon comes this way. They do have their Amazon stickers that say new, made in China, with the description of what the product actually is. So I'm going to get both of these unwrapped, and then we can unbox these watercolors. Say that was fairly minimal packaging. It was like enough packaging to get to me safe, and that's really all I want. The watercolor journal does have a belly band. They have made, and I actually own several Paul Rubens watercolor journals. I might pull them out. This one though is a cotton pulp paper, which is definitely more in line to what I like. It is 300 GSM and 20 sheets. There is a tape dot holding it shut. It does have an elastic band, so it's kind of moleskin style. And we will be at least swatching in this, if not doing some watercolor sketches. I don't plan on filling it up in this video, but I do like it that it has the little bonus pocket. So it is, if you like moleskin, but you wanted a cotton rag paper or a paper that could take water a little bit better, this might be a better fit for you. I used to use moleskin when traveling, and it's not my favorite. It was like the one that you could find anywhere, so that's what I would kind of go with. But I think I might like, without having swatched in it yet, I think I might like this little Paul Rubens one better. Now for the floral watercolors. Are you guys ready? It comes in a nice heavy cardboard box. It comes wrapped in, I still haven't figured out what these are for, eyeglass cleaners, but they are nice. The box is a very cute color of pink, which is pretty normal for Paul Rubens. And then inside we have our documentation, which I believe this is the same through all of the Paul Rubens palettes. So it's got the full watercolor lineup. It's got the names in Chinese. In fact, pretty much all the information except the pigment info is in Chinese. And then they have some information about how they're formulated. I've actually gone over this in other videos, so I will not be doing that today. We have our swatch map. I always love when a company includes that. And the swatch map includes the color name in English, the pigment info, and then the light fast info, as well as the numbers. And then we have our very pretty individually wrapped watercolors. They are not plastic. Nope, they're not plastic wrapped. And these appear to be like adhesive on. So they're like a sticker wrapped around it. So I think what we need to do next is go ahead and get these unwrapped and labeled. If you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I have been teaching comics and watercolor for about 15 years now. And if you are old here, hi, welcome back. So each of these half pans, as we said, has a red belly band, right? The red belly band has the color number. It has the color name, permanent orange, yellow, for example. It has the pigment information. It has, I'm not super sure what that 7 represents. Could be the series that it's in. And that is all the information that I can read that these half pans have. They are in plastic half pans, and this is a 24 color set that seems like it will work very well for floral. So I'm really excited to paint a bouquet with you guys. I want to unwrap one half pan. Well, I say one, this one's already basically half unwrapped. So maybe we'll start with that one. I want to unwrap one half pan in real time with you guys and then do the rest in time lapse, except this one, if there was any sticky on this, it either never got stuckied or I'm going to need to tape it down. So I'm going to go grab a pair of scissors and some double stick tape. And I'm just going to demonstrate, and these are some gross scissors. They just are some gross scissors. They've got some fluff on them. Just going to demonstrate the process for one, and then we can do the rest in time lapse. Now, keep in mind, I will have full show notes, including pigment information for you guys down in the description below or linked in the description below. That is a service that I provide for anybody who wants it. You don't have to be one of my patrons, but if you enjoy these kind of videos, just because this was sent to me by Paul Rubens, and thank you very much, Paul Rubens, it does not mean the majority of the watercolors and art supplies that I review here on the channel are sent to me care of. So if you like what I do and you want me to be able to continue to do it, you can join me over on Patreon. And I have already shared, because I've already sketched and penciled and inked the line art for the bouquet that I want to do with these watercolors. I've already shared that line art over on my Patreon. So if you like my art, if you would like to color along with me, you can find it at patreon.com/nattosoup. I always share the like line arts for field tests and things. If I create a line art, I always share those over on Patreon. And recently I shared a whole bunch of backer exclusive how to draw and paint flowers over there. So if you are into floral painting, and I assume you might be if you're watching a review of a floral watercolor set, I think you might really enjoy my Patreon. So I am going to do the rest of these in time lapse. I'm just fussy cutting this so that it can actually come out of the palette when I want it to, so it's not like sticking to other paint. And these scissors are so bad, I'm gonna have to switch them out for something that is a little less disgusting. But this is one of the things in general that I like about Paul Rubens watercolors. It's very easy to reuse their own, because they don't label their pans, but it's very easy to reuse their labels so that you can recycle and label your pans pretty quickly. colors are looking so pretty. The only one really I'm kind of concerned about is the cobalt blue is looking a little bit dusty and dry. And some of them were a little sticky, like this phthalo here, but honestly, it's understandable. We are in Southeast Louisiana. It is literally storming outside, and watercolors are hydrophilic. So they're gonna absorb atmospheric moisture. That is just part of what they are. And look, other than the shrink wrapping, which I guess I ought to include, that's our waste. I heard a lot of you guys are really into watching watercolor swatching. So this video is for you because there is going to be a lot of that. We're going to start by swatching on their included swatch map. It feels like this is on a cellulose paper, but fear not, we are also going to be swatching in their little pocketbook, and we're going to be swatching on my standard, the Blick Studio Cotton Rag block. So if you are a fan of watercolor swatching, today's video is for you. Feel free to cut your favorite parts and share them if you like. That is always helpful. I'm going to tape this down and, well, try to tape it down where it's not all catawampus. And also where I can get a good recording of it, right? So that you guys can enjoy that delicious swatching. With this watercolor set, everything activates very quickly with just a spritz of water and is very saturated, but water may pool on the paints and cause soupiness. The colors in this set are permanent lemon yellow, permanent yellow medium, permanent orange yellow, Indian yellow, Chinese red, peach light, rose red, magenta, nickel yellow, lavender violet, permanent violet, cobalt blue, French ultramarine, sea blue, indigo, turquoise light, permanent green, emerald green light, hooker's green brilliant, olive green, yellow sienna deep, cypress brown deep, Van Dyke brown, and burned brown. And I will have the pigment info and light fast info in the description or in the show notes for you guys. These swatches are so vibrant. We're going to take a closer look at them in a moment, and then I want to try swatching in the included cotton rag sketchbook. The paper in this sketchbook seems really nice. I like the texture on this, and I like the way it seems to encourage granulation. And the color selection for this set is really pretty. The paper in this sketchbook seems fine, and I look forward to playing around with it in another video. So far, I really like this little watercolor sketchbook, and I can't wait to play around in it some more, but I want to swatch these on Blick cotton rag paper next so we can really get into the nitty-gritty of these watercolors. The colors in this set are so vibrant and pretty. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but every time I work with them, it comes to mind. I had no real issues other than the aforementioned soupiness if you let water sit on the paper. These are watercolors that benefit really from no pre-activation. They are very hydrophilic, so you can kind of just go in with a wet brush and they'll activate very quickly, which could make this a great option for painters who don't have a lot of time, or painters who like to work on the go, plein air painters, or comic artists. That we've done some swatching, it's time to move on to color mixing. I'm going to be doing two types of color mixing. We are going to be doing optical and we are going to be doing atomic. If you're not familiar, optical is basically where we do lines of color, let those dry, do lines of the same primary colors going the opposite direction, and we will see if we get some secondary colors. Whereas atomic is where we take two colors and we smash them together to create a secondary color. For transparency's sake, these have actually dried out overnight. I had noticed that they were getting kind of soupy when I was using them yesterday after pre-activation. So I'm not going to pre-activate them, and I'll just be a little patient with them, and I'll see if that helps with color control. These have had a chance to dry out, so I'm going in with no pre-activation. And as I mentioned, again, I really do love this color selection. Really great reds, blues, and yellows for color mixing. There is no black and white, but I don't use watercolor white. I actually use gouache. So it's easy to mix a variety of colors, including chroma black from the provided selection. So I'm starting by doing some lines for optical mixing, and then we're going to do some atomic mixing. I noticed that we are able to get some really nice secondary mixes, and we could definitely get some more interesting mixes if I had taken more risks with the colors that I selected. But this will probably come up in the field test or in the wet into wet test to give you guys an idea. I'm mostly focusing on using primary colors to mix secondary colors. Honestly, I might like the color selection in this set better than the original PR set. Here are the primary color glazes for the optical mixing. So I'm just going to run a stripe all the way across. And you guys are able to see that while there is some color opacity, which does allow us for us to be able to get these kind of secondary color glazes, even from very light colors like yellows, we're not really having a whole lot of issue with like reactivation or color resist or colors running too much. Now, doing the optical test can always be kind of a challenge because if you didn't let the colors dry long enough, you will get some reactivation. But as you guys can see, we're able to layer the colors very easily and get some beautiful secondary colors optically. General, I am liking what I'm seeing here. I like their color selection. I find it very easy to mix good colors. I like their color choices. So now I want to move on to the wet into wet test. And I actually would love to be able to scan it and use it as a watercolor resource. So I think I'm going to do something unusual and do my watercolor field test on one of these Hahnemuhle round watercolor papers. These are cotton. So we should be able to see some beautiful color mixing. I know it's not as much space as we're used to for some of the wet into wet tests, but like I said, I like these watercolors and I want to be able to use this as a resource later on. So I'm doing the wet into wet test on Hahnemuhle's round paper. This is still a cotton rag paper that can handle a decent amount of water. I just wanted to do something a little bit different and kind of use up what I have, especially since I kind of ran out of room on the Blick cotton rag paper. I apologize for the weird stuff that my camera is doing right now. And I'm just trying to kind of pick a variety of colors. I was kind of thinking about like a sunset sort of mood that's just kind of inspired, or sunrise, I guess it's just kind of inspired by the colors that are in this set. But I also wanted to bring in some more unusual colors like the lavender violet and the permanent green and the turquoise light, which are additions kind of exclusive to, I don't know for a fact that it's exclusive to, but it's not in the regular palette. So unique, more unique to the floral palette. If you guys actually know if they include these colors in other 24 color palettes, let me know. So we get some really beautiful granulation on this paper, and I decided that I wanted to do a few more layers and kind of build it up. So I didn't notice any issues with reactivation when I started doing secondary layers, and I didn't notice too many issues with reactivation in subsequent layers either. So you guys can see we are able to glaze the colors on to build up saturation, and it gives us some really kind of beautiful blends on this paper. And the colors dry nice and saturated. So this wet into wet test is a little bit unusual compared to some of my other ones. I was actually kind of trying to paint something. I thought about doing like wildflowers or doing butterflies, and that's kind of what I decided to go with. So I ended up working it more than I would normally with a wet into wet test, but don't worry, this is not the field test. This is just me enjoying playing with the colors and messing around with them. While it's still wet, I decided to also, well, okay, I added another layer of clean water on top of it, and I decided to splatter in some color. Again, I was kind of thinking about wildflowers and butterflies, but this is also something that I will do during wet into wet test, is splatter in and dab in more opaque colors to see if that opacity holds up, to see how much oxgall is in the watercolors, to see if we get any kind of weirdness that you might want to be aware of before you started using these on an illustration that you actually care about. I decided to just kind of sketch some butterflies on it. This turned out better in my head than it turned out in practice. One, because butterflies actually kind of, I'm not a big insect person, and believe it or not, butterflies kind of creep me out. That doesn't mean I like harm them or anything like that. It just means like kind of avoid butterflies, but I do have a healthy respect for these beautiful pollinators, and just because they creep me out, that doesn't mean that I don't think they have plenty of right to exist on this planet. And it also doesn't mean we don't plant flowers and plants that are actually pollinator attractants. I was doing a live stream one time and I made the mistake of mentioning that I'm a little afraid of spiders because I had a spider bite go necrotic while I was in grad school and I almost lost my leg. And I had a few people lecture me about how important spiders are. Like, at the big age of 38, I am unaware of the ecological niche that spiders fill. So their intentions were wonderful, but I do have to point out, like, you know, I know butterflies are important and I know they are beautiful and lots of people value them. And that's why I'm trying to paint and draw them more, is because I'm trying to get over this kind of irrational fear of butterflies. But I'm still kind of afraid of butterflies. Just because I'm doing something to try and get over that, it doesn't mean that they don't kind of spook me. You know, two things can exist at once. You can be afraid of something and have respect for it and believe that it has an important place in the world. So I just wanted to make it clear. I probably could have done a better job if they don't creep me out so much. And I spent more time on it and more time looking at them and looking at close-up reference photos of them, but I did not because they creep me out. So this is gonna, I have a feeling me working on my butterfly phobia is going to take a long time. What's funny is I used to be kind of afraid of moths as well, and I'm actually less afraid of moths than I am of butterflies at this point. So exposure therapy, you know, seeing people draw and paint them does actually work. It's just a longer process for me with butterflies than it was with moths. These paints have a very creamy, quick to activate consistency, which is a joy to paint with, but they do require some color control like a mixing surface. Even when partially dry, these paints are very eager to move around. This wet in a wet test ended up getting a little out of hand, but I still had fun playing around with these paints, and I look forward to seeing what more they can do when we actually field test them. I currently don't know where my other Paul Rubens watercolors are right now. I don't know why. I think I brought them to a class and they're packed somewhere, but I do have the Paul Rubens travel watercolor kit. I'm not going to do a swatch off with these, but I do want to compare the colors. So we are going to start with what's in this little kit here. Permanent lemon yellow, transparent medium yellow, Indian yellow, permanent orange red, Chinese red, madder red, rose red, violet, permanent violet, cobalt blue, France, ultramarine, sea blue, Prussian blue, Payne's gray, yellow green, tree green, Hooker's green brilliant, emerald green deep, Mars yellow, Pazuli red ochre, umber, burnt sienna, burned brown, and coal black. And there's several colors in common, but there are some substitutions. For example, this set, the floral set, does not contain a Payne's gray or a black, but it does contain a turquoise light as well as a lavender violet. It also contains a yellow sienna deep rather than a Mars yellow. It contains a cypress brown deep rather than a umber or a Pazuli red. It contains Van Dyke brown and burned brown rather than burnt sienna. We also have a tree green in this travel set rather than an emerald green. And we have a violet, which is kind of like a red violet color, rather than a magenta. We have madder red instead of rose red, and this set contains an opera rose. Oh, I'm sorry, they call it peach light, but it's like an opera rose kind of color. I'm not super sure which color in here replaces that, but that is another substitution that I've noticed. So this set does have a few more colors that might appeal to a floral watercolor artist more, but I do think the little travel set is just so cute. And they change them up from year to year. I think this was like the 2002 one. It looks like a makeup compact. I love that. So here are swatches of the colors on their little swatch map for this. And this is what the watercolors look like. It is a Very pretty little travel set. My only problem is it doesn't really stay shut. And I talked about that in the review where I talk about this set. I swatched this set and I swatch the Paul Rubens set that kind of corresponds with this set. So if you guys are curious about that, I'll be sure to link it for you guys in the card and in the description below. But they're very similar, and what I really like about Paul Rubens and Mei Liang, which is their student grade, is that they are just very like bright, saturated, immediate watercolors. I think they're pretty good watercolors for what you're getting, and I think they're a lot of fun to paint with. So I'm really looking forward to working on the field test with you guys. So here we have the official field test. If you are one of my patrons over on Patreon, you have the printable line art with some suggestions for how to go about printing it on the paper of your choice. Whether you want to watercolor it or you want to marker it, that is up to you. I'm going to be using a lot of, they call this color peach light, I would call it an opera rose. And I'm also doing a lot of the pour techniques that you guys may have seen if you've watched some of my other recent watercolor reviews. I like those techniques. I think they're a lot of fun. I love painting on top of them. I love the chaos that it adds. And also I want it to be kind of consistent within the series. So I did a light wash of Opera Rose with a large fluffy brush to get some dry brush going on in there. And then I did pours of Opera Rose, Permanent Yellow Medium, and Turquoise Light, and I allowed that to dry fully. Now I'm doing a grisé with indigo, which might have overly flattened the beautiful color mixes that we had. We had these beautiful chromatic color mixes, and when I shared them to social media, people really liked them, and I also really like them. That's why I scanned this before I totally committed to the grisé, because I knew those CMYK mixes were just so good. But at this point, I'm not sure if the grisé flattened it too much. I decided to go with the grisé because everything was kind of visually blending in for me. And sometimes adding a grisé can kind of help me see what objects are what and can make it easier to paint with. It also establishes shadows earlier on into the watercolor illustration. And it means that I don't necessarily have to do so many shadows later on. Really like this technique. I have talked about it in several tutorials. If you are looking for watercolor tutorials, I'll try to list some of my favorites for you guys down in the description below. Please give them some love because tutorials do not do as well as I would like here on the channel. So I decided not to go too heavy with the grisé. It should be enough for me to more easily tell one flower color from another and to help add some depth, but it shouldn't kill the color, especially with really light colored flowers like the mountain laurel, and that's those larger ones. So if you guys are curious, this is actually a bouquet of flowers that are mostly native to Louisiana. Chicory is the exception. It was introduced here, but chicory is so popular, especially in our coffee, that I felt like it was fair to include chicory. Also, chicory is this beautiful color, so I did want to include this kind of light blue pop. So the initial colors don't seem to budge or bleed, and I think that's a good sign for layering. So far, these layer really nicely and cleanly. The indigo is more like a Prussian blue, so it layers really nicely with the colors that I've selected. And I tried to glaze on more pink and yellow, and I did notice there was some reactivation and some muddiness with the indigo, but it was raining on the night that I was painting it, so it may not have had a chance to fully dry. And I'm going to keep saying this. I love how this color combo works together. I love hot pinks with yellows. It's so good. I almost wish I could leave it as is because the result is so pretty. I may have to revisit this technique later on with white flowers so the colors really shine through. I do want to do a magnolia illustration at some point. And the real trick is for me not to muddy the colors because so far, even with reactivation, it is still very clean and pretty. So if you guys are curious, the plants in this illustration are cinnamon fern, mountain laurel, beautyberry, American black elderberry, chicory, cinquefoil, which is in the rose family, and Giardia pucella, which is a type of aster. It's that brown center with yellow orangey petals. You guys will see what I'm talking about. I don't know what the common name for that is. I feel like these watercolors are really easy to work with. And then 3 hours later, I wrote definitely very easy to work with. Do not need to pre-activate these, but you do need a mixing surface for paint control. Color does have a tendency to reactivate, unlike the Marie Blue watercolors, but that may be a quality you want for blending, softening edges, or reworkability. Now, you guys might have noticed I am wearing a possum or an opossum, an American opossum sweater in some of these shots. This is actually sesame, and I'll try to remember to put a link to the shop. There's one on Magazine Street, but you can order online from them as well. They are a possum rehab. I think that is a wonderful cause. And when I wear other artists' stuff, I do try to give them a little shout out because, you know, as a fellow artist, I appreciate those shout outs. And I know it can really help with business. And we're all having a really, really tough time right now. Now, I am finding it a little bit more challenging to build up more saturated colors, but that could be how I handle these paints. And I may not be going in strong enough from the get-go. So as I normally do with these field tests, this was painted on Arch's cold press cotton rag watercolor paper. I did the sketch digitally and I printed that as a blue line print onto the paper, and then I inked on top of it using Sakura Pigma FB. So pretty much the same as always. And the techniques that I'm kind of going in with are like mostly like, there's some wet into wet, as you guys can see with the chicory. I started with cobalt blue and then I'm adding in ultramarine blue, but it's really just like a lot of layering and a good amount of wet into wet. And then sometimes some spritz and splatter techniques just to try and kind of keep the color vibrancy and keep some of that chaos going on. I also will cheat with the spritz techniques. If I left like a halo around an object, or if there was a resist for some reason around an object and there's like a white area, a few spritzes will make the color bleed and it'll make it look more intentional. So that's kind of a easy way to go back and fix that if you don't mind creating some mess and creating some chaos. Which, isn't that kind of the point with some of these field tests, is to really push these watercolors to kind of their limits, to kind of bully them and to see what they'll do so that we can actually talk about them and we can have a good idea of like the pros and the cons, the strong points and the weaknesses, because so many brands of watercolors are vastly different. Like, I also really like Marie Blue watercolors. And I actually have another field test I want to do with this brand of paint, kind of inspired by the Marie Blue field test that I did a while back, with a Lilliputian person coming out of the similar wildflowers to these, more Louisiana wildflowers. And, you know, these handle just completely differently from the Marie Blue, where you can do layers and layers and layers and they don't really reactivate. Like, once they're on the paper, they're on the paper. Whereas the Paul Rubens moves a little bit more and in some ways could be considered more forgiving depending on what qualities you're looking for. So you guys will see I'm doing lots of layering, trying to bring in some opacity, trying to adjust colors, that sort of thing. Just kind of enjoying this field test. You might have noticed by how I'm talking that I've run out of notes. And that is because I just kind of got to the point where I said what I needed to say and I could just enjoy painting with these. I kind of forgot that I was doing a field test, which is always a great sign when I'm just enjoying the paints and not thinking of ways to troubleshoot and problem solve the issues that the paints are causing. But I also kind of covered what I wanted to say about these paints earlier on. And I don't necessarily, even though I do repeat myself, I don't want to repeat myself like ad nauseum. But I say that, and then I was literally about to say, but I really do like the color selection in this. And, you know, I do paint a lot of people, and I do paint a lot of bright colored flowers and plants. So it definitely is a palette that's very well suited to the kind of stuff that I like to paint. I also really love this kind of opera rose because I paint kind of femme, more girly things with this kind of color palette. So it's very well suited to just the kind of subject matter that I enjoy painting. So I really do like this color selection. And I'm really glad that Paul Rubens reached out to me to test this, because I would not have bought this, mostly because I have so many Paul Rubens palettes that I could not have justified buying it. So here I am going in, trying to add more saturated color, adding in a little bit more shadow. This is not meant to be a tutorial walkthrough, by the way. I would love to do a tutorial walkthrough of this for you guys, but I have found that very few people watch my tutorial walkthroughs, so it's just really not... It kind of kills my algorithm when I share that kind of stuff, and I lose a lot of momentum here on the channel. So if you guys would like to see me like re-narrate this at a slower pace and walk you guys through the decisions that I'm making, do let me know. Either in the comments section, or you could reach out to me over on my Discord server, or if you're a patron, let me know. And I would say, like, if 10 patrons wanted to see me do it, I would do it. So it doesn't have to be a huge high number, just enough people for me to know that it's doing some good and that people are actually interested in it and will actually watch it. Of course, me always with the splatter techniques. And then I did need to re-ink this a little bit, going over, and because these do carry some opacity, especially the yellows, and I do find that re-inking just kind of helps clean up muddiness. It kind of helps add back in some contrast. It makes it easier to read visually, and it just kind of cleans things up. It's a good almost finishing touch, because I am going to add white gouache later on. It's a good almost finishing touch that kind of ties everything together, allows me to fix some mistakes. I do use a white blotting sheet to protect the illustration from my hand, but I did want to get some shots of me inking it so that you guys could actually see it, because like I do know that covering it with a blotting sheet, and maybe I should use like a clear plastic something instead in the future, but even though it protects the illustration from oils in the hand and from smearing, it is not pretty to look at and is kind of boring to watch when half the page is covered with like a piece of white paper. Going back in, adding in some white gouache details. If you're curious, I'm not like brand loyal to gouache. I have a tube of Winsor Newton and a tube of Utrecht that I have been using for 10 years now, because I basically just use it for this kind of stuff. I am gross and will literally just dip my brush into the tube and then use my palette to, you know, kind of mix the color around and make sure I get the consistency of cream. It's not really like a noteworthy thing, but I do point it out because it is something that I do for most of my illustrations as a finishing touch. I may have gone a little overboard painting this, but I had a lot of fun working with these watercolors. I really like the color selection, and I feel like it does definitely work well for painting florals. I do have some pros and cons that I want to talk about in a little bit more depth though. So for the pros, these are vibrant watercolors. They're easy to mix, they're easy to layer, they're transparent enough that you can still see prior layers through, and I really like the color selection. In fact, I like the floral color selection better than their normal palette. Like, this is really much more in line of the colors that I like and the kind of colors that I typically need when painting the stuff that I like to paint. The cons is that these are very easy to reactivate, which I like, but some may find frustrating, and there isn't enough variety in the neutrals. Van Dyke Brown and Burned Brown are too similar, and we would really benefit from a burnt sienna. I do appreciate that they don't waste space, at least in my opinion, with a white or with a black. An indigo plus one of the browns can almost get you to a black, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to get colors actually dark enough. Obviously, I was able to get there eventually, but I did kind of have to struggle with it for a while there, and I was wondering if I would be able to reach the kind of saturation that I was really looking for. I really enjoyed working with this palette, and I want to thank Paul Rubens for reaching out to me and sending me to share it with you guys. I'm not quite finished with it, however, but that's going to be another video. I am working on this illustration for a field test painting people with this same palette. So if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, I hope you will stick around and maybe watch that video. Anyway, I enjoyed the color selection. I enjoyed the vibrancy of the colors. There's like a few things that, like, with this illustration that I'm not super happy with, and I'm not sure if it was me or if it was the paints or what. And there's like a couple color substitutions that I would make, but if you enjoy painting bright, colorful, and saturated things, the floral palette is a good place to start because it's already got some great color selections for folks who really love color. As I have said multiple times, I really like the color palette selected for this palette. I do think a couple of the neutrals could be subbed out for just slightly different neutrals, but in general, I like the color selection, and I think honestly it would be a good one for a variety of people, not just watercolor flower people. I have a field test coming up where I will be painting a person surrounded by wildflowers. So that'll give me more feedback, more information on whether or not these watercolors work well for painting people, because I am, after all, a watercolor comic artist, and that is primarily what I care about watercolor for, is painting tiny little people. So I am definitely curious to see how this palette holds up to that, but I think based on what I saw painting the field test here, that we should have no problems with that, and I look forward to sharing that field test with you guys in another video. As I mentioned earlier, I have reviewed a lot of Paul Rubens products over the years, so if you're curious about other Paul Rubens products, make sure you check the description below for links. What I will say though is, while I personally prefer this color selection to their regular palette, if you already own their regular palette, you do not need this. It's not significantly different to justify buying a whole new palette. That said, if you were interested in getting Paul Rubens watercolors, you like my art, you like my color palette, you kind of generally vibe with my aesthetic, and you haven't purchased a Paul Rubens palette yet, but you would like to, this would be my recommendation. Like I said, I think it has a good selection of colors that are very easy to mix and offers some really nice saturation and some very interesting options. I didn't talk about the build quality or like the general quality because I had talked about that so many times here on the channel, but suffice to say, I like Paul Rubens. I think they make good quality paints. I think they make very fun paints to paint with, and over my years of reviewing Paul Rubens watercolors, I've had no issues with them. If you have gotten this far and you would like to paint along with me, I have shared the line art for this bouquet over on my Patreon. I also have years and years of printable coloring pages, printable coloring line arts, printable coloring sheets. So if you enjoy coloring, or if you would just like to collaborate and paint over some of my line art, you can join me at patreon.com/natosoup, and you'll have access to the full library of printable coloring sheets, as well as other goodies, including class materials and presentations that I have created over the years. So you can find me at patreon.com/natosoup. If you are new here, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really enjoyed it. And if you are old here, welcome back. But it would mean a lot to me if you enjoyed this video, if you would click the like button, maybe leave a comment. What is your favorite watercolor brand? Or what is your favorite color of watercolor paint? Maybe you guys will tip me off onto my next favorite thing. I always look forward to hearing back from you guys. If you haven't yet, I would love it if you would click the subscribe button and hit the bell notification so that you never miss an update from me. I am always sharing art and works in progress and swatches over on my community tab. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope this was helpful in helping you guys make art a habit. Bye guys!